Shopify helps you sell at every stage of your business. Like that, let's put it online and see what happens stage.
And the site is live.
That we opened a store and need a fast checkout stage.
Thanks. You're all set.
That count it up and ship it around the globe stage.
This one's going to Thailand.
And that, wait, did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Whatever your stage, businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com/listen. Before Shopify, were you wondering, where are my sales at? Now you're selling with Shopify, the global commerce platform supercharging your selling. You have no problem selling online, in person, on social media, and beyond. Gary, easy on the cha-ching.
Oh, sorry, but my Shopify sales are through the roof.
Start selling with Shopify today and discover how millions of businesses around the world use Shopify to ignite their selling. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/listen. Shopify.com/listen.
So our podcast is called Right and Wrong.
Are these your notes?
These
Are these your notes about what we're going to say?
Anything.
Nailed it.
Yes, the short answer.
So how many novels did you not finish?
Oh my God, so many.
It was perfect. What's she talking about? This is nonsense.
Ooh, a spicy question. I love it.
This is it, guys. The big secret to getting published is you have to write a good book. You heard it here first. Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. Today I'm lucky enough to be joined by Madeline Milburn Agency's very own senior literary agent, Hayley Steed. Hi, Hayley.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for coming. How's everything in publishing at the moment?
It's a bit mad. It's Frankfurt Book Fair next week, so we're all running around like headless chickens, but it's also the best bit. So yeah, it's fun, but busy.
It must be nice that events like Frankfurt can actually happen again and you can all go and be there in person.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking to my rights colleague earlier, who hasn't been, since 2019, and she's, I think, still a little bit nervous, but she's very excited.
So, Madeline Milburn, you joined in 2016.
Yeah.
Was that as an agent? Like, did you go in as an agent?
No, I went in as Maddie's assistant. So there were only 4 of us at the company at the time. I was the 4th member of the agency, which now feels a bit mad because there's over 20 of us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went in as Maddie's assistant and just slowly kind of worked my way up as her associate and then agent and now, senior agent, which feels very formal.
But was that am I right in thinking you'd worked in publishing for a while before that?
I'd been in publishing like maybe 2 years before that. When I came out of uni, I worked in a magazine for a bit and then I quit that to do the intern circuit. But I mean, that was still when everything was unpaid. So I did a lot of unpaid internships, slept on my aunt's floor in London. And then I did an internship at Curtis Brown, which I really enjoyed, which was paid. And then from there, I took a job in PR. With a kind of an agency. So they worked with lots of different publishers, but still in books. So I was there for about just over a year before I joined Maddie. So not a huge amount of time, only kind of one full-time job before I joined here. And
that was the PR job?
Yeah, which I really enjoyed, actually. I didn't think I always wanted to be an agent, so I didn't think I would, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, was it always the plan to be an agent?
Always the plan, yeah. I read a Marion Keyes book when I was a teenager that was called The Other Side of the Story, and the main character in it is a literary agent, and I'd never heard of it and read that and was like, that sounds like the best job ever, and that was it.
Was that fiction?
Yeah. And I talk about it all the time, and one day I will meet Marion and I will tell her, and hopefully we'll have a laugh because she's great.
How accurate was that depiction of a literary agent compared to the real life version?
I think in the book, the agent does sorry, there's a dog barking here.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
The agent immediately does like a 7-figure deal. So from my experience, it's not that accurate, but it made it sound very glamorous.
Oh, okay. That's great. Well, it sounds at least better than the depiction of agents and authors on most movies and television, which is always wildly inaccurate.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about your work as an agent, what sort of books you are interested in, what you represent. It's the main thing is commercial and book club fiction, is that right?
Yeah.
And only adult, you don't do younger stuff?
No, I don't do any younger stuff. I do a bit of non-fiction as well. But yeah, it's all on the adult side.
So speaking from my own experience here, because when first approaching the publishing industry, there's so many moving parts and so many different pieces that are just very hard to kind of categorize. And it can be very overwhelming when you come in thinking, oh, I've got a manuscript. Where do I send it? Who do I send it to? So my question to you is, because I mean, I've been around the industry for a while now, and I still don't fully know all of these definitions. How do you define commercial fiction?
That is a very, very good question. I mean, I define commercial fiction as just books that sell and books that are good to read. I think we tie ourselves up in these terms of commercial and literary, and I think sometimes people think commercial fiction means it's not well written, because literary fiction is the stuff that's all about the prose and, you know, the quality of writing. But I mean, my colleagues here, I mean, we're on, in general, quite a commercial agency, I would say, and our writers are brilliant writers and the quality of their work is very high. And I don't think it's about, for me, commercial just means it's got a way in that is, you know, hooky and interesting and kind of that one line pitch that kind of draws readers' attention in, whereas literary fiction is more thematic and perhaps feels a bit slower in the reading kind of process. And so I think commercial just means, for us, it can mean like a very industry term, which means like it fits into a genre box. You know, you can sell it in a certain way, you can package it in a certain way. It has a certain type of cover that makes it look like slightly more like other things. But, you know, I always come back to Sally Rooney's Normal People. And I'm like, that the reason for me that brought in lots of more people is that there was a love story in there, which made it more commercial. It made it more accessible than her other books that are maybe, you know, more like wider thematically. Yeah. Whereas Normal People, I think, really spoke to, you know, romance readers and women's fiction readers, and that gave it so much more breadth. So I think commercial is a good term, and doesn't, you know, we don't really need to box things either way.
Yeah, so it's more about sort of mass appeal, like mass market appeal, a broader audience that you're able to reach, as opposed to a lot of literary fiction targets a quite a niche group.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's more pitchable in that it's about a thing, you know, that's happening rather than about the reading experience. So I think, yeah, I always think about the books that you see in the supermarket that are packaged a certain way, you know, that you can see it's clearly historical fiction, or you can see it's clearly a thriller. That's where we talk about kind of commercial, because it is kind of speaking to a specific readership who want a certain thing from the thing that they're reading, whereas literary can kind of just take you anyway and not really be about one specific thing.
Yeah, it can be more conceptual or abstract, or however it wants to be. And so on from that, how do you define book club fiction?
Yeah, again, I think we just make up terms in the industry to please ourselves. I think book club is kind of that in between where it sits along. I kind of think of it as like genre plus, and that it sits alongside a genre, but is kind of doing something a little bit different, or blending with another genre, or has a kind of issue at its heart that it's more thematic. So, you know, we have a book here, Ellen Oliphant is Completely Fine, which was considered book club fiction because it has a mystery element to it, has a women's fiction element to it, but it, you know, it's very voice driven. It's all about the character. It's about her kind of journey in her own life. And so that felt less commercial in that it wasn't, you know, a straight thriller. It wasn't straight crime. It wasn't a rom-com, but it was still, you know, it still had a plot. It still had an arc to it. It still had elements of those genres, and encourages conversation. I think is the kind of real basis of book club fiction is, things that you can discuss in a reading group, in a book club, that you can kind of delve into the kind of the depth and the intricacies of a character or a situation. And the same with, we've got a book here called The Push by Ashley Audrain, which I think you can categorize as a thriller. It's kind of We Need to Talk About Kevin-esque. But again, has those kind of meatier topics about what it means to be a mother and things that you can talk about a bit more than just also being like a page turner with a great twist.
Okay. So book club fiction, based on what you're saying here, I would imagine is often also commercial fiction, but with some kind of subversion or key sort of discussion point at its heart.
Yeah, that's how I would interpret it. And sometimes I think it's helpful to think of it in terms of where you would find a book, and that the kind of beautiful Waterstones hardback that you would see is more often than not a book club novel. That is, if it has a very beautiful jacket and it has a very pitchable topic, but also has kind of the plus element of the genre, I suppose. Yeah, that has that depth to it.
Okay, great. That's useful. What do you so imagine that there's a lot of budding writers who have got their manuscript and they're trying to figure out whether they should submit to you or not. What advice would you give them about deciding whether they have book club or commercial fiction that will apply to the sort of thing that you are looking for?
I think the best thing to do is think about who your readership is. The comparison titles can be really useful for that, because if you're comparing yourself to people, like Lee Child, he's a commercial crime writer, so it's sort of using those market comparisons and where you would see it can be really, really useful. I also wouldn't stress about it too much, in that I think we get a lot of writers that pitch to us saying, I've written this very literary novel. And we kind of think, actually, I think this could be a really great book club novel. Or I think, this is more commercial than maybe this author thinks. And sometimes people get a bit iffy about that. And I actually, again, it's like, this commercial is not a bad word. We're just saying, actually, I can see a slightly different route to market for this. So I also wouldn't stress too much about those terms. And it's much more about finding an agent that you can kind of look at their wish list and say, I think my book has elements of that. And, their favorite books, and think, actually, mine is quite similar to that. And then pitching it in. I think it's helpful to know what you've written. And that's, about reading around and knowing your audience and kind of thinking, right, if it's like this author I can see is kind of positioned in a book club way, or, the Amazon category is X and that's like mine. I think that can be useful. But I would always just give it a go anyway, because I've got things on my list that are slightly more literary, and my literary colleagues have things that are considered more commercial. I think it's about stories and voices that speak to us and that we really enjoy. And so we don't, again, want to get too caught up in saying, I only do this thing, and missing out on something that we fall in love with.
Yeah. But that's a good way of looking at it. It's that sort of tangible direction where if you're not sure if it does fit into a certain category, figure out where your book would be on a shelf in a bookshop, and what would be next to it, and where. That's a really good way of approaching it. And I will add, for anyone listening who's thinking about submitting to Hayley, you can go to the Madeline Milburn website, head over to her profile, and there is a much more in-depth look at everything that she is interested in and looking to add. So do go check that out. Now, let's talk about submissions. Always interesting whenever I speak with agents on the podcast to see how they tackle submissions, because there's often a lot of differences in the sort of order and the weight with which they look at a submission. And at Madeline Milburn, there's actually, I don't know if this is new or not, but there's a rather fancy form submission page on the website with drop-down selections and text boxes and everything. So no excuses for authors getting the submission wrong, because it's very difficult to. Within that, it's the pretty usual package for the industry: cover letter, synopsis, 10,000 words. Technical question before I get into the actual submission part, and this is more personal curiosity, because it's all through that sort of form, that portal form on the website. Does that come to you? Does it come through as like an email for you, or is there a sort of big hub that you guys all log into?
It comes through as an email, but to a central inbox. So the form is new. You've spotted that. And the reason that we've done that is because we just have more agents here now. So what that form does is that you have to, there's a drop down for which agent you want to submit to. And so what that does is just within this inbox that we have, it just slots it into a folder. So if you put my name, it will be slotted into my folder, so I can log into there and read the ones that, people have said to me specifically. Because before then, we only had a few agents, so it was quite easy for us to have them all in one place. But with the expansion, we just kind of needed a way to make sure that, everything got read and nothing got lost. So that's what the form is for. It still comes through as an email for us, but it's just like in a separate inbox, because I think I'm in awe of agents that let authors submit directly to their inbox, because our inbox is just crazy anyway, and I just don't know how they can deal with the influx. But we log in every day and read them every day. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was actually having this exact discussion with a friend of mine who's an author who was trying to reach her agent. And she said, yeah, obviously agents are very busy and sometimes it can take, a few days for the agent to get back to her. And I said, does your agent, just out of interest, do they have a separate inbox for submissions and, rest of work? Because it must be chaos, the amount of submissions that you get in if it was all in one place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I don't know how other agents do that. I mean, I guess it depends on how many you're getting. And I know even some agents, even if it's their inbox, they'll have a rule set up that it does file it into maybe a reading inbox or something. So there are ways to get around that. But yeah. But you guys are often and always inundated, I'm sure, with submissions.
We get a lot, which is great.
Do you know how many you get?
I mean, we used to say we got about 100 a day, which I think is still true, but I think that's across the whole agency. So that's including 2 children's YA agents and 6 agents across. Is it 6 agents? I always lose track across the adult side. So there are a lot of us. So it makes sense that there's a lot of submissions coming in. So we can split that between us quite easily.
Okay. So when you do open up your submissions, what order do you go through each part? And what are the key things that you're looking for within each piece?
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $50 a month. Then we called SelectQuote. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $19 a month, a savings of $369 a year.
Whether you need a $500,000 policy or a $5 million policy, SelectQuote could save you more than 50% on term life insurance.
For your free quote, go to SelectQuote.com. SelectQuote.com. That's SelectQuote.com.
SelectQuote. We shop, you save. Full details on example policies at SelectQuote.com/commercials.
I always look at the covering letter first, which I think is probably obvious because that's in the email body.
Yeah.
But because I'm an agent of, things that are commercial, I'm looking for a one-line pitch, which I think you can often, I think most of the things that I've signed, I've known from the letter, I'm excited. So we read absolutely everything that comes in. And yes, there will be things that surprise me as I open them. But I think because of the kind of fiction I represent, if it comes in and it's got a really brilliant one-line pitch or a really brilliant question at the heart of it, that's already got me interested. And then I'll go read the material. So the kind of opening 10,000 or 3 chapters, I'll read that. And if I like that, then I read the synopsis to find out kind of where the book goes from there, and that it doesn't go on a strange tangent or, suddenly go to space or something if it's meant to be women's fiction. And then if I like everything, then that's when I would email the author and call it in. Sometimes I don't read the synopsis if it's a thriller, because I quite like to read the twist myself, because I think so much of a reading experience of a thriller is, the journey to, where you want to get, and if you're going to guess it. And so I think if I know what the twist is, then I'm reading almost looking for it and thinking, oh, that feels quite obvious, but of course it's obvious if you know. So yeah, sometimes I won't read the twist, but I think it's, we still ask for a synopsis that includes it so we can check.
Just in case you don't want aliens turning up in your historical fiction novel.
No, preferably not.
That's interesting. Are there any things that you think really make a cover letter stand out?
For me, it is that kind of the hook of the story. So, and by that I mean kind of the point of difference. So it's sometimes a question of a what if, like what if you're in this situation, or it's a specific, inciting incident, like a setup of a story that is really interesting, or the theme that it's exploring that I think is really interesting, or a certain time period. So that for me, and I think as an agency, we ask for a one-line pitch, which not every agency does. I don't think many do. So that is part of a covering letter that we've set up specifically so we can see how people are pitching their work. But I think, again, covering letters, I think writers sometimes really wrap themselves up in writing the perfect covering letter. And I think as long as you know what you're writing, who it appeals to, and what your book is offering, that's all you really need in there. And, a little bit about you is great too, if it's kind of supporting that. But I wouldn't stress too much about perfecting every line, or, I think if you can just introduce it, tell us kind of what the genre is, or what, where it sits in the market, and give us a brief pitch of what you think your book is doing that would appeal to that market and that feels, is maybe doing something a little bit different or a little bit new. That's all we really need. Because we read everything that comes in as well. So if your covering letter is kind of, maybe not representing your work in the very, very best way, we are still going to go and read that material anyway. We don't write it off at the covering letter. So it's not something to kind of really, lose sleep over.
Yes. Yeah. I also noticed that in your submission guidelines, you recommend putting some comparison titles in with the cover letter. What sort of, I know that there's often comparisons that some agents don't find helpful, and like, what sort of comparisons do you think are the most useful ones? Like, if that means necessarily not a book in some cases.
Yeah, we're very happy to have things that aren't books. I think the most useful things are books that feel recent. I think if you're comparing yourself to like Austen or Roald Dahl, there's a question for us. I mean, maybe Roald Dahl less because that's more of a tone maybe, but I think you want to be comparing to books that have done well in the last kind of 3 years, preferably.
Yeah.
And I think if you can't find a comparison title for your work, that to me would be a little bit of a concern, because that to me suggests that there's not a readership there. I often get submissions saying, oh, there's nothing else like this. And I'm like, well, there could be a reason for that, and that maybe there's not a demand there, which is always not, it doesn't mean it's not a good book, and it doesn't mean that it's not interesting. It's just, if a retailer can't, if a bookshop can't sell that to a customer, then we can't sell it to a publisher, because that's what they're thinking about. So I think, things that feel recent, things that just feel representative of what your book is doing. We often get books that are kind of like, it's like this TV show, and I think there's so much crossover now. Mm-hmm. I find that really useful. I sold a book recently and compared it to Mayor of Easttown, because that's what it felt like to me, and that really, hooked editors in, because everyone had watched it and really enjoyed it, at least, within publishing. So I think that could be useful, and also not stressing about something that feels exactly like it. You don't want something exactly like it, but I think if you can say it would sit alongside, people that enjoyed this book would enjoy my book. That's the thing to think about. And books that maybe have similar themes or a similar genre, similar in tone, books can be similar in so many different ways. It's not about them being similar stories maybe, but just kind of, if you're writing something that's a character journey of, one person figuring their life out, you might compare it to Ellen Oliphant, even if it's a male protagonist in a completely different setting, because the experience of reading is going to feel similar, and you might appeal to the same readership. So it's something, it's more about the feel of the book and what that book is, who it's appealing to, than it needing to be word for word, the same. But very happy for it to be cross media and anything, or, that's really useful.
I guess it also shows that the author has a knowledge of the market, and they've kind of looked into what is selling, and the kind of stories that people are telling in that area.
Yeah, I think reading around is the best thing you can do as a writer, because you see what other people are doing, you see what's working, you see what's been done, you see how people write that type of genre, and you can apply it to your own work and just immerse yourself in other stories. I think is the best way to know that audience is there. I mean, I know my children's agent colleagues will get submissions that say, oh, I haven't read a children's book since I was a child, but here's mine. And I think, how can you possibly know what children are reading right now if you're not going into bookshops and reading those books? So it's really important to know what's reading, what people are reading, and what's working.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good advice for anyone thinking about trying to fit their work into a submission package at the moment. So we're approaching the end of 2022. You are open to submissions. Is there anything in particular that you'd love to add to your list?
Oh, it's a very good question. I mean, I would say I'm always very open to being surprised. I sometimes don't know what I want until it lands, which I appreciate is very unhelpful for people submitting to me.
That's the joy of the profession, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we all do it, is for that discovering moment where you feel like you found the next big thing. I have been for a while really keen to find a big love story. I think, something like The English Patient, one day, those big epic stories that kind of stay with you and have that slight point of difference in how they're told. I'd love something like that. I'm also really looking for a lot of dark stuff. I think a lot of my list is women's fiction, although that as a genre I think is really broad and it includes so many things. But I don't represent many thriller writers at the moment, and I'd really love to find more. I really loved Gallet, for example, and I loved The Push, which is one of our books, but not one of mine, one of my colleagues' books that feel kind of, they've got a thriller angle to them in the suspense and the tension, but are also looking at something a bit darker and a bit deeper, something a bit more thematic and emotional maybe. I'm kind of always drawn in by a character and their internal conflict than I am by a serial killer. I love things that are kind of about toxic friendships or toxic relationships, dynamics between people, because I think human nature is the most interesting thing about these books. So something like that would be great. But I'm really open to anything at the moment.
Okay, cool. That's a lot for people to work with if they are thinking about submitting to you. So good stuff. And before we get on to the final question, always a fun one to ask agents is, have you ever wanted to write yourself?
I did when I was younger. And now I can't believe people do it. I think it's incredible that people have the dedication to sit down and write a full novel. They're really long. Yeah. I think there's lots of us that write kind of 10, 20,000 words and then think, oh, I don't know where to go next. So I'm definitely happy this side of the fence. I think any ideas that I have for books, I tend to just feed to someone who I know will do a better job with it than I would if I tried to write it. And I simply wouldn't have the time. So yeah, it's not something I'm planning on anytime soon, for sure.
Okay. But maybe one day. Never say never.
I'd never say never. No.
Yeah. Are you quite editorial with your authors?
I am. Yeah. I think as an agency, we are. We tend to do quite a bit of work before a book goes in submission. I think just to make sure it gets, the most offers and the most interest it can, and give, that author the chance to work with the absolute perfect publisher and editor by having a bit of a choice. So we are quite hands-on, but I think for good reasons. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, that does bring us to the often dreaded final question, which is, Hayley, if you were stranded on a desert island but could take a single book with you, which book would it be?
I really tormented over this, and I always come back to the same book, and the author knows because I worked with her years back and she knows I love her. There's a book called The Chocolate Run by Dorothy Gibson, which I read every year and I just love it. So I would have to pick that one because it's my comfort blanket. And there's so many other books I love, but that's the one that I always read over and over again. My copy is very battered, so yeah.
That's great. That's that you have like a personal connection as well to the author is so nice. Adds an extra.
I hunted her down. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I was determined to find her when I worked in publishing. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, that's a great choice. I really like that. I'll have to check it out sometime. Well, thank you so much, Hayley, for coming on the podcast and sharing your experience and your knowledge of publishing and everything that's going on with you. It's been amazing chatting.
Thank you. No, it's been great.
And for anyone listening, if you want to keep up with what Hayley's doing, you can follow her on Twitter at Hayley Emma Steed. And if you're thinking about submitting, I'll say it again, I already said it once, head over to the Madeline Milburn website. There's profiles on all of the agents, including Hayley, and all of the guidelines for submission very clearly laid out with a nice shiny form to make it super simple for you. And to make sure you don't miss an episode of this podcast, follow us on Twitter at Right and Wrong UK or on Instagram and TikTok at Right and Wrong Podcast. Thanks again to Hayley and thanks to everyone listening. We'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks for hanging around until the end.
So, you've got an idea for a business. The store of your dreams. There's just one thing to figure out. Everything. That's why Shopify's all-in-one commerce platform makes it easy to sell online, in person, and everywhere else. Sell on social media, source products with an app to get that first sale feeling. It's the only solution that gives you everything you need to sell everywhere you want. So when you're ready to bring your idea to life, power it up with Shopify.
Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/listen.
Thanks again for supporting the show, and we'll see you in the next episode.
O'Reilly. You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people. O'Reilly.